We have made it to chapter 27. United now in their concern for Evelyn, the two apprentices headed for Holt's quarters. All of the Ireland party had been assigned rooms in the main hall. As Holt was their leader, he had been given a small suite of 3 rooms. At the door, Will knocked perfunctorily and heard Holt's gruff reply, "Come." As they entered, he took in the fact that Eric was in the room with Holt. It was hard to miss the bulky Canadian. He seemed to fill most spaces he occupied. He was sprawled in one of the comfortable carved wood armchairs that decorated the room. Doubtless liberated on some warship raid down the coast, Holt was standing by the window framed against the low-angled light of the late afternoon. He looked quizzically at the doorway as the 2 boys entered hurriedly. "Holt," Will began urgently. "Horace says Evelyn's disappeared. She's safe and sound back in Helsham." A familiar voice finished the sentence for him. Both boys returned to the speaker. Standing a little back in the shadows of the room, she hadn't been evident as they entered. "Evelyn!" Horace exclaimed. "You're all right." The girl smiled. Now his eyes were accustomed to the darkest parts of the room. Will could make out that her face and clothes were smeared with grease and dirt. Her eyes met his, and she smiled at him a little wistfully. Then she upended the flask of juice that she had in her hand and drank greedily from it. "Apparently," she said, setting the flask down, "although I have a thirst on me that I doubt I'll ever quench, all I've had to drink in the last 18 hours was a little rainwater that made its way through the canvas covers over thee." She hesitated and looked to Eric to supply the word she was after. The Jarl obliged. "Four-pack." "Four-peak," he said, and Evelyn repeated the word four-peak. "Exactly. Of Slager's ship," she said. Will and Horace exchanged puzzled glances. "What in the devil's name were you doing there?" Will asked. "What's with the light? I guess it's because it's from the sun. Anyway, Slager has sold out to the Temujai, and he's planning to betray Halsham to them." "What?" asked Will, his voice almost cracking with surprise. He looked at Evelyn. "How do you know?" The girl shrugged her slim shoulders. "Because I heard him discussing it with the Timidrai leader. They were barely 2 meters away from me." "It seems," Halter put in by way of explanation, "that your old friend Slager sailed down the coast yesterday to a rendezvous with the Timidrai Shan, one Mr. H. And since our traitor obviously didn't trust his new allies too far, he insisted on all negotiations being carried out on board his ship, just to keep Mr. H retainers at a distance." "Which is how I came to hear it," Evelyn finished, but now Horace was scratching his head in bewilderment. "But what were you doing on the ship?" he said. "I told you," Evelyn replied, "eavesdropping on Slager and the Temujai." Horace made an impatient gesture. Yes, so you've said. But why were you there in the first place?" Evelyn went to answer, hesitated, then stopped altogether. All eyes in the room were on her, and she realized she didn't really have a logical answer to that question. "I don't know," she said finally. "I was bored, I guess, and feeling useless. I was looking for something to do. And besides, Slager looked sort of shifty." "Slager always looks shifty, looks sort of shifty," Eric put in, helping himself to fruit from a bowl on the table in front of him. Evelyn thought about it, then conceded the point. "Well, that's true, I suppose, but he looked even shiftier than usual," she said, "so I decided someone had better keep an eye on him and see what he was up to." Truth be told, Evelyn was quite enjoying herself now. She had gone from feeling useless and unnecessary to being the bearer of important, even vital news to Holt and Eric. She couldn't help preening just a little. Horace's next reaction was exactly what she'd hoped for. "But you could have been spotted. What if they'd found you there? They would have killed you," he said, his concern for her evident in the worried tone of his voice. That thought had occurred to Evelyn on more than one occasion as she had crouched in the damp space above the full ship. When she had finally realized the situation she was in, her skin had crawled with the fear of discovery with every second. But now she affected a nonchalant air about the entire episode. "I suppose so, but let's face it, someone had to do it." She was delighted to notice that Holt was looking at her with something approaching awe. She glanced quickly at Will, hoping to see the same look of admiration there. His next words dashed that hope. "All very well," he said dismissively, "but the important thing is that Slager is planning to betray us. How is he aiming to do it?" That's the point, of course, Holt agreed. He indicated a chart of the Scandinavian coast that he and Eric had spread on the table between them. Apparently, friend Slager plans to put to sea quietly the day after tomorrow and make for the same rendezvous point down the coast. Only this time there'll be 150 Timajau warriors waiting. He'll take them aboard and ferry them back here to Hellshot. He'll never fit 150 men into a warship, Will interrupted. Holt nodded. Apparently he has another 2 ships waiting for him out behind this island, halfway to the rendezvous. They left a week ago, Eric put in. Supposedly they were going to raid behind the Timajau lines. It seems the Skulls are in league with Slager, and they're waiting at this pre-arranged point. He tapped the map with his dagger, with which he'd been peeling fruit. A few spots of apple juice fell onto the parchment. Holt raised an eyebrow at him and wiped them away as the jar continued. With 3 ships, they'll carry 150 men easily. Then what? Horace asked, and Evelyn, piqued that attention had been diverted from her and that Will had ignored the dangers she'd been in, leapt back into the conversation. They'll be able to attack our forces from the rear, she explained. Think of it, 150 men with the element of surprise suddenly appearing behind our lines. That could be very nasty indeed, Horace said thoughtfully. So what do we do? We've already taken the first step, Eric told him. I've sent Svengel with 2 of my ships out to Forkcork Island here. Again he tapped the juice-stained knife on the map, and again Holt raised his eyes at him to make sure Slager's other 2 ships don't keep any rendezvous. 2 against 2, Will asked. Is that enough? The Jarl cocked his head to one side and smiled at him. Count yourself lucky that Svengel wasn't here to hear you say that, he replied. He'd consider his crew alone to be more than a match for 2 ships full of Slager's followers, but in fact, Slager's ships will have only rowing crews. They'll need all the space they have to cram those Timajau on board with them. But what do we do about Slager? Will asked, and this time it was Holt who answered. That's the problem. If he gets wind that we know what he's up to, he'll simply abandon the plan. We'll be able to prove nothing. It'll be his word against the word of a former slave, and an escaped one at that. He smiled at Evelyn to show he meant no insult, but was merely stating the facts. She nodded her understanding. But if Svengel finds the other 2 ships at this island, surely that's proof, Horace interjected, and Holt shook his head. Proof of what? The crew will hardly admit they were waiting to go fetch the Timajau, he said. Horace sat back, frowning. This was getting too complicated for him. Then what can we do? Will asked. But at that moment there was a heavy knock at the door. They all looked at each other in surprise. The clandestine nature of their discussion had made them speak in lowered tones, and the sudden interruption had made them all stare guiltily, as if discovered. Anyone expecting visitors? Holt asked, and as the others shook their heads, he called once more, Come. The door opened to admit Hodak, one of Eric's younger followers. He glanced about the room, noting the identities of all present. He looked uncomfortable as he noticed Evelyn. Thought I might find you here, he said to Eric. Ragnar's calling a special council in the Great Hall. He wants you there, Jarl. He indicated Evelyn, and you'd better bring the girl with you. Evelyn? Why should she go? Holt asked. He saw the girl shrink back from the young Scandinavian. Maybe she had some premonition of what was to come. The council's about her, Hodak said awkwardly. Slager's has involved Ragnar's vow. He says the girl is really Princess Cassandra, daughter of King Duncan. Oh look, we made it to 28. So I'd like to thank you for listening to read up to chapter 27. If you'd like to listen to me read up to chapter 28, then please stay put, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye bye.